Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Rebecca Dahl. I'm the program coordinator for CLCC. And I just want to welcome you to our fall programming for Conserving Land by Staying Connected. I'm glad to have you here. And of course, I'm so glad to be kicking off this series with David Allen to talk about fundraising in the age of COVID. As David had mentioned, and as I started to put in through the chat initially, if you haven't already, please just go ahead and rename yourself to have at least your first name and your organization so that we all sort of know where we're coming from. If you don't know how to do that, hovering over your picture, those three dots, if you click on those, nice right click, there's a rename option. Or if you click on the participants tab at the bottom and find your name on the right-hand side, hovering over there, you'll find a more menu, a more button, and dropping that down, you can click rename and have an option to rename yourself there as well. For the time being, if you can remain on mute, that would be great. And if you don't mind turning off your video once we get to the screen share, but we will ask you to come back on when we break out into breakout groups in just a little bit here. I think other than that, I'm going to go ahead and let David take it away. So David.
Rebecca, you want to talk about the Google Doc real quick?
Oh, sure.
And maybe put the link in the chat.
Yeah, so we are going to have a Google Doc to wrap up. Let me just grab that link here. Everyone should be able to see this. When you click on this link, it will take you to your browser window. So it will take you away from Zoom. So you'll have to navigate your way back here as well, but we'll use that as a means to sort of regroup after our session. And that link I've just dropped into the chat.
Thank you. So yeah, there's a Google Doc. If I was there in person, which would be infinitely preferable for me, then I would have pieces of butcher block on the tables, and I would ask you to just scribble down anything that comes to your mind that you feel like you might want to remember or might be share worthy. So aha moments or ideas or offerings of any kind. We're going to use the Google Doc to do that sort of as a virtual alternative to butcher block paper. So if you have an idea that comes to your mind or that something that you hear that you'd like to remember, throw it up on the Google Doc. Each of these lines is numbered. Just go to an empty line and type away. Type anything you want. Give us a joke if you want to do that. But this document will be available to everybody who participates today following the session, and hopefully we'll get some great ideas that come out of that. This will be available to you throughout the entire session. Rebecca's right that you navigate away from Zoom in order to get there. So to get back, you're going to want to click on that blue camera icon at the bottom of your screen to make sure that you can get back. So with that said, I'm just going to get started here. My name is David Allen. I know a lot of you, which is great. I love Connecticut and love working with Land Trust in Connecticut. I'm a fundraising and organizational development consultant, and I consider that as a preferred order. So I'm not an organizational development consultant that also does fundraising. I'm a fundraising consultant that also does things like strategic planning and needs assessments and things like that. And I work virtually exclusively in the conservation space. So I work with land trusts, I work with nature centers, I work with river groups, I work with conservation organizations all over the country. I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin. My background includes about 13 years with Nature Conservancy in Oregon and Texas, and then eventually in Wisconsin. And I've worked with more than 150 land trusts all over the country in the 10 years I've been consulting full time. So what I want to talk about today is sort of getting our headspace, our heads on straight about approaching fundraising for this fall. I think it's going to be different. I think I'm not afraid of it. I'm not depressed about it. I'm optimistic about this fall. I'm less optimistic about 2021. So you can set up how well you do in 2021 by what you decide to do and when you decide to do things this fall. If we step back and think about it objectively, what we're really talking about is soliciting almost everybody that you know between now and Christmas. And so giving some thought to that and thinking about sort of how that rolls out, given everything else that we know about what's going to happen between now and Christmas, is an important strategic objective. Here's a couple things to think about. And I would always think about presidential elections as interruptive, always. And this is going to be even more so. So interruptive in terms of fundraising. We're going to get an avalanche of TV ads, of mailbox stuffers, of email, of text messages. I'm getting solicitation calls and political calls all the time on my cell phone. It's going to be an avalanche that we know. Normally, I would say the last week in October and the first week in November are lost from a fundraising standpoint. So don't worry about it. I mean, just know that it's going to happen and then just kiss off those 2 weeks. This year, a little bit different. The avalanche is going to start sooner because of absentee voting and absentee balloting. We're going to need to have our act together. So because this dead zone right around the election may start as early as the 15th of October. And because ballot counting may still be going on up to a week after the election, I think the dead zone is going to be more like 3 weeks this year instead of 2 or maybe even 4 weeks. Because of that, if you do a fall appeal, if you do a fall campaign, I'm strongly advising everybody to get in the mail by the end of the first week in October at the latest. That doesn't give you a lot of time right now. If that means this becomes the priority right now, is to get in the mail or in the email. After the election's different story. You know, you want to avoid Thanksgiving Day, of course, and that thing in that weekend. But the couple days before Thanksgiving and the week after Thanksgiving, those are all good times to be soliciting and in the mail. Don't press pause on your fundraising this fall. This is not a time to be reticent or hesitant about getting in the mail, about asking people that care about you for money. So let's talk about that. I'm going to share my screen, and this is our vision today is to give you some sense of some things to think about, and then we're going to break up into breakout rooms and talk about sort of what's going on. Let you talk about and share what's going on with your organization, and then we'll come back together and sort of compare notes and wrap it up. I'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at that point. So I prepared this presentation for use at conferences like the Connecticut conference, most of which have been canceled, and so I've been asked to do things virtually. And I've shown these slides I don't know, half a dozen times or so in the last several months. It seems like this is what everybody wants to talk about anyway, so it's a good time to share these slides. We don't have any experience with pandemics in fundraising. We haven't had a pandemic since, at least in my lifetime, that we've been, and 2000 or 1918 was a little bit too long ago to really draw any strong conclusions about what to do now. But we do have experience with economic recession, and we can infer some things based upon the lessons that we learned from the most recent one, which is in 2009. And the big message here is that when donors reduce their giving, when they decide to give less money this year than in previous years, they do so by reducing the number of organizations that they support. They don't do so necessarily by reducing the amount that they give to each organization. So you want to be one of the organizations that makes that cut, if you will. You want to be an organization that, that they say, this is too important to me to let go. This is an important concept, and I'll come back to it a couple of times. A second lesson from 2009 is that foundations took it pretty hard. Now in 2009, there was no warning. It sort of happened in October of 2008, and many foundations were overextended at that point. and didn't realize their portfolio was going to be was going to be less than they were anticipating. And in fact, many of them had made multiple year commitments at that point that they couldn't, that they had to honor. And so the combination of those two things meant that their giving was really already decided for 2009, 2010. And it wasn't until 2011 that there was a substantial rebound in foundation giving. So think about that if you are dependent on a foundation or two. This will be a little bit different because we've had a little bit more warning. And finally, and this is the point I was driving earlier, is that the instinct is to say, oh, well, people are hurting. The last thing they need is to be solicited. Or there are much higher priorities in the world. You know, we'll hold back on ours and let people donate to other things. If you think that way, stop, because this is not the time to hit the pause button and be hesitant. This is the time to say, our mission is more important than ever. Our mission is part of the solution to health problems in the country. In 1918, what did happen is that fresh air and sunshine were considered to be healthful and rejuvenative. And so this is going to be exactly the same thing. People need places to go to get outside. They need places to go to be in nature. They need places to go for fresh air and sunshine. Guess what we're providing as Land Trust? We're providing exactly what what our communities need in a big, powerful way. This is not the time that our missions are irrelevant. This is a time when our missions are more relevant than ever. So as we think about sort of a philosophical approach to how do we raise money this year, here's some things we need to think about. First of all, let's not assume that we're going back to normal. We're not going back to normal, or we're going back to something, but it's not going to be normal. I was joking the other day because most of my work involves travel, and I've been grounded since March. I'm going to be grounded for a lot longer. I've had to sort of reinvent my entire business here, but even when we're free, we feel better about traveling. We're not necessarily going to feel better about gathering yet. So it's the normal that we go back to is not going to be what happened before COVID. And if we get our minds around that, especially when it comes to relationships with donors, that's going to be an important concept. Think about your fundraising events, for example. There's two things that I think would make a difference, would make the biggest difference in just about any fundraising program anywhere. And one of them is about transactional giving versus charitable giving or philanthropic giving. Transactional giving means that if you give money, you have to get something in return. And many of our fundraising programs in the Land Trust community and elsewhere in the nonprofit community are based upon this sort of exchange relationship. I give you money, I get something, I get a calendar, or I get a tote bag, or I get, and the more money I give you, the more I have to get in return. In some ways, this is self-defeating because it doesn't honor the philanthropic instincts of the donor. So we need to get away from transactional fundraising to some degree, and we need to put an emphasis on philanthropic giving because you want to see something done, because you believe in the mission, because it's coming from your heart and from your emotion. And that's the second thing, is that we approach fundraising, or we tend to approach fundraising from the idea that we've got something that's worth doing and we need to just explain it to people or sell it to people, or if they just understood how important it was, then they would give us money. We need to stop thinking like that and start thinking about what they want to do with their money. What people care about, what they do with their own money, a lot more than they care about what we do with their money. So if we start thinking about the organization as a way for donors as a tool for donors to help donors do what they want to do, then we'll raise a lot more money. We're good at this. This is something that is native to all of land trusts when it comes to gifts of land. Because what do? We talk to donors and we say, why do you want to protect your land, or wouldn't you like to protect it? And then the land trust becomes the tool to help them do what they want to do. The same paradigm shift has got to change in cash fundraising. This is something that they want to do. This is a value that they have. This is an expression that they want to make, and the land trust becomes the means to help them do what they want to do anyway. If we can get those two changes made philosophically, we'll raise a lot more money. There's also this idea that that we need to get away from personal, because personal is emotionally difficult, because I don't want to be rejected, so I'm not going to ask. Regardless of whether you're asking, if you can communicate with your members and donors in very personal ways, especially now, then it will help you make this cut. When people stop giving to some organizations and keep giving to other organizations, that's the cut. And why are they going to make that decision? Because they have a relationship with you that is personal. How do you do that? You do that with personal phone calls, personal letters, personal cards, personal email, personal gifts. The key word is personal. If it comes from the institution, if it's an e-blast that it says exactly the same thing to everybody, then it's not personal, and people can tell whether it's personal or not, very, very easily. So philosophical approach, make it personal. Whatever you can do to increase your availability as real people doing real work, it will help you raise money. The messaging that I alluded to earlier, we're relevant. Our messaging, our philosophical approaches, our work is more relevant now than ever. Land conservation, relationship with nature, experiences outdoors, critical stuff. And our commitment to what we're doing, our land trust commitment to what we're doing, is unwavering. So your support is more important now than ever. Blue Frog has done some research into sort of, especially in coronavirus, sort of what people need to hear versus what we're telling them. And it's not all, there's not a lot of overlap. We're telling them how great we are and how much we're doing and what we did last year and what our ambitions are for doing next year. And what people want to know is that their gift is making a difference, is that what they're doing is relevant. What they're doing with their own money is relevant. All these slides will be available afterwards, and I can let you study this later. But the bottom line is that the closer we can come to messages that resonate with what people want to hear. What am I doing with my money? What am I accomplishing? What am I getting done? Then they'll become more loyal, and they will give more money over time. So some ideas, some things that some innovative approaches from across the United States. I talked to people all over the country. Here are some of my favorite ideas. Bioland Conservancy in Houston took a volunteer with a cell phone and went on a monitoring visit with a land steward and sort of filmed the whole thing in real time and posted it on Facebook, and people loved it. It was a way to sort of get in touch and be tangible in the work of the land trust without necessarily having to be there. They also did a sort of Stump the Ecologist feature on Facebook that was kind of fun. Westerly Land Trust in Rhode Island live streamed the release of a red-tailed hawk. That was pretty cool. Probably the same in Connecticut as it is all over the country, but parking lots are jammed. People are running into each other on trails, and this Trails app that Westerly has gotten I don't know, something like twice as many hits as it did last year or something like that. So, you know, anything that you can do to provide access to people, for people, and help them find access to land that they can go walk on will be welcomed in this era of COVID and coronavirus. Natural Lands in Pennsylvania is a large land trust right where Pennsylvania comes together with a couple of other states. And what they're doing is posting volunteers in the parking lots. Some of that is for social distancing purposes. Hey, you know, some of their trails are now converted into one-way trails or loops, and they're to help people stay socially distant. But they're also seeing it as an opportunity, you know, to pass out membership literature. Hey, look, this is not a county park. This wasn't paid for by tax dollars. This was paid for by hundreds of donors who are making places like this possible for people like you. Be one of those people who can help make more places possible in the future. Mississippi Valley Conservancy in Wisconsin, their executive director, who was the director of development before that, understands this sort of relationship stuff, and she said, look, I'm going to go and talk to my donors in as personal a way as possible. So she would take little gifts and go visit people at their homes and sort of stand back from the front door, and they'd come out on the porch and they'd talk. One of these visits, there was a woman who had made a $500,000 pledge to give a pledge to give $500,000 a year for 3 years, and this was all for land acquisition, so it was all sort of encumbered already. And this was the second year of her pledge, and she came to the executive director had come to explain, this is what is going on, and this is where we are, and you know, here's how we're reacting to the coronavirus and so on. And the woman said, this year I'll remove all the restrictions from my gift. So she released the organization from having to use it for land acquisition, and they were able to keep staff on and everything else because that gift was there. Reaching out in personal ways will help you raise more money. Multiple organizations have been converting their in-person events to virtual events. There's some talk. There's some organizations that are doing non-events. You know, you're invited not to come, and you can have a pajama party at your house, and you can have a pajama table for $1,500, and you can have a pajama seat, and so on. So, and you're in good company because there's lots of other famous people who won't be there either. And so you can start to name, you can have a lot of fun with it in sort of a fun way. Sponsors, just because you're not having an event doesn't necessarily mean that the sponsors are gone. So you can have sponsors for a virtual event. You can have sponsors for you know, to make up for the fact that the event isn't actually going to happen, and you know, credit the sponsors publicly to do that. Lots of companies are hurting right now. Sometimes that's a little more difficult than others, but people care. And so giving them an opportunity to continue to support you can make a difference. And the other thing that I want to mention here really quickly is matching gift campaigns. So finding a matching gift now is great. This legacy match idea is where the match itself is matching plan gifts, and it's a different take on a matching gift campaign. But several land trusts across the country are considering a legacy match in order to stimulate plan giving as well as put money in the coffers this year. In one case, for example, there was a $10,000 gift secured. $500 from the match would be made available to the organization for use this year for every person that advised the organization that the organization had been left in that person's will. So all they had to do was say, hey, look, I put you in the will, you're in our will. That's all they had to say, and then the $500 would come out of the match. So the organization received effectively $10,000 plus information from 20 people that they had been left in those donors' wills. Pretty cool concept that I don't think has gotten enough traction in the land trust community anyway. This is a time when we can start thinking about things that are not urgent. We're at home, we're not traveling, we're not doing as much. Some of us aren't doing as much. But it's a thoughtful time. It's a time when we can start to pick out some things that are important to do but aren't necessarily urgent. And so I'd just like to mention this as we go through the next several months. Maybe there's some things that you can pull off the shelf and take care of that might not have gotten enough attention from you in the past when you were skirting around doing lots of other things. And I mention this because donors are in the same boat. They have an opportunity to sort of do spring cleaning in September because they can pull some things, they have time to pull some things off the shelf that are not urgent but are important. If you were going to pull some things off the shelf that are important but not urgent, what would they be? Planned giving, maybe. So revisit your website, revisit the materials that are. I've seen a lot of websites where the contact person on the planned giving page no longer works for the organization. So there's an opportunity, or no longer is on the board of the organization. So there is an opportunity to sort of revisit your organization's profile in planned giving. Here's another one. Pay attention to the website general. Is it easy to make a donation? Is it easy to find your way around? Is there something that you can update? Is there a photograph that you can change that will update and refresh and sort of freshen your website? There's a good time to sort of pull some of that stuff out. Pick up the phone. Call your top donors from last year and just say thank you for supporting us through the coronavirus pandemic. We're still here, we're still active, we're still working. Now's a great time to pick up the phone and just say, just take care of some of the donors that you have. Develop policy development, gift acceptance, unrestricted bequest, distribution. These are policies that many organizations need, they don't have. This is an ideal time to sort of pull some of that stuff off the shelf. So important, but not urgent. And finally, database cleanup. So make sure people's names are spelled right, make sure people's addresses are updated. The national change of address is NCOA is a service that the post office provides and mail houses provide and so on. It's not expensive and it will save you a lot of money in wasted postage down the road. This is a great time to sort of pull that out. How is your donor database performing? Are you getting things? How are your metrics? Is your membership renewing? Are they giving more money every year, and so on? So what can we learn from the data? There's a lot of information out there about what to look for, but follow your nose and see what you can learn from the data that will help you in the future. I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention the CARES Act. So for people who don't itemize their taxes, which is the great majority of people in the country right now, there is a $300 per person above the line tax deduction for each person, so $600 per couple. This means that even if you don't itemize your taxes for this year, for just 2020, you can donate up to $600 per couple, $300 per person, and deduct those gifts. For people who do itemize their taxes, normally there's a restriction on how much of that can be deducted, how much of their adjusted gross income can be deducted, and that restriction is in the 50 to 60% range, depending upon the person's specific tax liability. But this year, 2020, in the CARES Act, that restriction has been lifted, and now now you can deduct up to 100%, just for this year. So this is a great year for people to bundle, to say, I'm going to give a little bit more this year because I can give up to 100% of my adjusted gross income, and then maybe give a little bit less next year or the year after. Just some things to think about. So think about just the overall environment of fundraising. The market's really strong, so it's a great year to give appreciated assets, assets of stock, assets of real estate, assets that have appreciated where you're liable for capital gain on it. It's a great year for bundling, for giving more than you would ordinarily, because with the idea that it might not be such a rosy picture a year from now. If you're out of work, if you've been laid off, if you're part of the group that's been furloughed, not so much. So it's a great time to focus on people who are sort of in that upper economic brackets. I'm going to stop there and just see if there's any questions that I can handle really quickly. I've got about 5 minutes for questions. I'll stop the share. Feel free to unmute and just ask away. I've got time for about 3 questions. Anybody? Everybody good with all that? Maybe. Shall I wait you out?
David.
Yes.
Richard Treat speaking. How are you?
I'm doing great, Richard. How are you? Good to hear your voice.
I'm here with Gwen because I couldn't get my computer to find you. I feel, now this is myself speaking at the age of 74, and our membership graphic, of course, skews to older than average. People are thinking about their own mortality. The land trust commitment to perpetuity is something that I think has more persuasive value this year than recent prior years. What's your reaction to that?
I think you're absolutely right, and so it's a great time for endowment, for example, or for plan giving. These are two areas that I would have no hesitancy in focusing on for your fundraising for the right people. I will say that that we don't want to do that necessarily at the expense of our operating funds. So if you're asking for a little bit more, or a little bit, or for a specific purpose, you might want to also mention that, that would be nice to be able to take $250 or $500 or $1,000 out and renew your membership at the same time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you for the question. Anybody else? Boy, you guys are a raucous bunch, I'm telling you. What we're going to do now is we're going to change gears, and we're going to do a breakout rooms. So the way this works is that the whole group of 50 people will be separated out into 4 or 5 groups, 5 or 6 groups, 6 groups. And so roughly about 7, 8 people per group. If you haven't been through this before, let me take you through it visually. You're going to get a message on your screen saying that you've been assigned to a specific breakout group. Do you accept? And you have to say, yes, I accept. And then you go in, and your screen then will have just 7 people on it. We're asking you to engage with this material, engage with what, tell us some stories about what's going on with your organization. Each group will have a facilitator. The facilitators have these questions that they're already. We're asking you not to dominate the floor, just like it was a regular breakout room. Speak your mind. We want everybody to participate. We want everybody to speak, but we want you to cover your ideas briefly. We'll do a 25-minute breakout. So we're gonna start in a couple minutes, and we'll end at 10 after. Translate the time zones. 10 after 1. Did I get that right? So the first question is, as you're introducing yourself to everybody else, maybe you guys all know each other, but maybe you don't. Share what you're doing now. How are you engaging with your donors? What strategies are you employing? Are you thinking about it intentionally and proactively? And what's working? Give us some inspiring stories, some things that we can pick up and run with. And then second is there something you heard from me today or from anywhere else that you feel like you could make a difference for you, that you could just plug and play and work with right away that'll make a difference? And then third, if you get that far, I'm interested in sort of ongoing conversations. This is a vibrant and wonderful community. I mean, and goodness knows, Amy and Rebecca do a fantastic job of helping us help each other. But what could we be doing in addition? How can we support each other, not only in this fall, but all the way through the pandemic and whatever's coming in 2021 and 2022 as we turn this corner into the unknown? How can we support each other? How can we continue to this dialogue that we're getting more and more traction from each other? Okay, so wherever that conversation takes you, we'll come back at 10 after 1, and we'll spend the last 20 minutes reporting out very briefly and handling any questions that might come up. Okay, so you're going to get a message that says, hey, please accept, and that's the way you accept it. That's the way you get into your breakout room, by accepting that message. I will be, everybody's back, or everybody who's stayed with us is back. Mm-hmm. How's that? Have you all done that before, or is that a new experience for you? New experience. Yeah. Pretty cool, huh? Amazing what virtual technology can do. What?
It was a new experience for me.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's cool. So what I would like to do, say that again, Elizabeth?
It was so much smoother. I've been in one where it took people 6 minutes. There was some problem, and it spent half the time trying to find the breakout room. So
that's because we've got Rebecca working the boards, and CLCC is on it. Let me tell you. I'm interested in your content. So give me a sense of what you talked about. I noticed that there is 0 contributions to the Google Doc, which is fine. It works in some places and doesn't work in others. But I'm interested in what you found that resonated in your group, what you heard that you feel like you can pick up and run with. Anybody, just pull yourself off mute and let us have it.
I'll speak for my group. I was the moderator, and Rebecca brought up that when they participate in one of these, community foundation campaigns, in this case, Give Local, that they actually have a specific project that they're looking to raise money for, and they have actually a budget for it. And when we have done it, when CFT has done it, we haven't had a focused number or project or anything. So everybody really liked that in our group.
So having these online campaigns that one day, give locally or give Connecticut or something like that, right? And then and you're saying your organization, when you provide a specific purpose for the money, you raise more money.
Right. For the last couple of years, we've done that, and it was much more effective. And in this particular case, this particular year, we raised money for information kiosks at our trailheads, and we made an explicit, thanks to Valtraud, who I see is on the screen also, who does outreach and development for us. We made an explicit link to people's desire to be out in nature on the trails during COVID. And we managed our expectations. We figured we wouldn't really raise very much under the circumstances, but we did far better than we'd expected. So
Great. For what it's worth, these regional or statewide electronic can't give campaigns are setting records all over the country. Arizona put together one. For the state of Arizona, they raised like 3.7 million in 2019, in April of 2019, and in April of 2020, they raised over 7 million, almost twice as much. And that experience is more common than not, is that people are being super generous, more generous than usual. Direct mail is very positive. Email funding campaigns is positive. Online fundraising is getting a bump. It's the response from donors across the country is extraordinary.
Mm.
Let me
Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, just one quick thing. I really like the idea that David gave also of live streaming an event. We have a huge nest of bald eagles on one of our preserves that have had babies now 4 years in a row. And the state comes to ban them every couple of years. And I think live streaming that would be incredible, because people come by boat on the lake to look at the nest and all. And I think people love bald eagles. So David, if you'd send us the information how that group live streamed it, I think
It was
cool.
Westerly Land Trust in Rhode Island.
Oh, okay.
Westerly.
All right.
James, were you going to offer something?
Yeah, just a couple of things from our group. I found it interesting. We do all of our fundraising pretty much through personal contact, direct mail, email. We don't do a lot of events. I mean, we do a big event called Connecticut Trails Day, but that's mostly sponsorship driven. But it was interesting to listen to folks who do get money from events and the ways that, they've been trying to offset that. And part of it is, in one, the sponsors, reaching out to the sponsors who have been, open to allowing the funds to be kept or to move the funds to next year, utilizing a car event where, you have a concert with cars. I thought it was interesting, another one where utilizing the concept that individuals, donors tend to live in donor bubbles, with friends and family, and organizing a function, a party, a gathering outside with people who are comfortable in that bubble, and then going and talking about the needs and making sure that people are aware of the fact that it's going to be a direct ask. And so it was interesting to see sort of the creativity that people are using to offset what they're doing. And I think the key message I got from you that has worked for us is you got to keep asking, and you got to ask frequently, and you've got to probably be more aggressive now than ever before, even though it may seem counterintuitive. We have found that our donors have stepped up in a huge way because they value what we do.
Yeah. So let me pile on a couple of those comments really quickly. The Skagit Land Trust in Skagit, Washington, normally has an event for 400 people or so. They're a fairly large land trust. They have 400 people coming to an event that's a primary fundraiser for them. They realized this year that they weren't limited by the space. If it was going to go virtual, then they're not limited by how much space they have. So they weren't limited how many tickets they could sell. And they had 1,500 people.
Wow.
So we can think more broadly about outreach and reach and getting people involved. I'll go back to Westerly Land Trust. They make a lot of money on a farm to table event every year featuring seafood in Rhode Island. And this year they delivered all these meals, like a couple hundred meals. Seafood, all prepared, with masks and gloves and everything else, but they were all distributed with volunteers. It was an enormous effort, but talk about the outpouring of appreciation from from donors who could participate in that way. And a third I'll just mention is that one organization had their event in a drive-in theater. And everybody came in their cars and, you know, had car-to-car service and so on, and then the entire event was on the screen. I loved it. I thought it was great. I'll have to try to remember who that was. I don't remember right off the top of my head.
So a couple of things from our group, which was an interesting mix because it was Yao and I on behalf of CLCC, but then we had Will from Greenwich Land Trust, which is a very strong land trust that has just done exceptionally well in every way. And then we had TPL represented by June, so a national organization with a state chapter. And then we had Chris representing a conservation district, so not a land trust. And it was kind of an interesting perspective to hear. And I would say the theme that came up throughout was consistency in communications. And I think that was, you know, as Chris is just starting to find ways to cultivate new members, he was also very interested in hearing what doesn't work, you know, rather than just hearing what does work, but what doesn't work. So he avoids, as a new ED, going down a path that people have already tried, it doesn't work. But consistency in communications. And I think, Will, if you're still here, maybe you want to jump in and just talk about a little bit what you shared with us, but just the constant touches. And the other message that came out of this that they heard was, you know, moving from transactional to philosophical in terms of the messaging and the approach. I think we all agreed that that was something that was important, and also the sincerity of the messages as well. So Will, you want to just take it from here just quickly?
Yep, my apologies, I was eating lunch. So I'm back on the screen. Here at Greenwich Land Trust, you know, it's been a obviously unbelievable and extraordinary time that we've experienced. But I think what we've been trying to do is stay consistent with our messaging. I shared with the group, we have this big long flow chart of what all the different touch points are that we have throughout the year. We probably have 5 or more asks out every year, a membership, 2 events, a board appeal, as well as our annual appeal. So it's trying to remain consistent in our messaging and also in our timing. Again, we've had to throw some of those out the window. We've had to evolve a lot, but I think that consistency has been the most important. Utilizing this time to tell our story, to share our mission and the importance of that mission in our community have all been really met very positively. I shared a story with the group that we actually entered into a pretty significant capital campaign on March 10th, and then quickly had to push the stop button, or the pause button, as I kept saying, and really had to strategize and think through how we were going to simultaneously raise capital for operating, but also a significant properties come up for us to have the option on, and being able to move on that as well. So again, messaging has been key during all of this, and we've learned
sending the message that we're carrying. We're not closing up. We're not. We're still doing deals. We're still pursuing opportunities. We're still active. We're still providing the services that you've come to know and love. So sending that message through consistent messaging is, I think, is exactly the right answer.
And to your point, David, I think we've done a pretty good job at remaining confident that, you know, what we are here to do remains vitally important to this community. And we use the word community a lot. We use conservation a lot, but if you meld the two together, it really highlights the type of work that we do. And I think people, especially at this time, it really resonates with a lot of people.
I want to tell you a quick story from Estes Park, Colorado. The Estes Valley Land Trust. Yeah, I won't make this a long story, but the Estes Valley Land Trust is in a resort community. So there's a whole group of people who are there because they're retired and they want to do the sort of the retirement thing. And then there's a whole group of people who support the retirement thing, right? They work in restaurants and hotels and resorts and so on. Because everything's closed, the second group is hurting. And so the board of the Estes Valley Land Trust approached the staff and said, hey, we have an idea. And what they did was they raised $15,000 and provided $500 grants to 30 families who were in this sort of support community type of furloughed type of community situation. And in return for which the families as a family would pledge 20 hours of volunteer stewardship work on the preserves. So talking about community and conservation and community conservation, when the donors and the board members and the sort of the members of the community who are benefiting from this program all got together for these 20 hours worth of work on the preserves, whole new alliances and a whole new appreciation for what was going on were forged. And it's just a great feel-good story on so many different levels. I think it's worth sharing. Anybody else? What was your takeaway today? Was this valuable?
So our group shared a lot of great ideas of how they've kind of had to pivot their events. We have the Farmington Land Trust, their fundraising dinner, and instead of one big dinner in one location, they're doing different pods in smaller groups at different people's houses who feel comfortable with doing that. We have Simsbury Land Trust who mailed out trail books of the town's trails to donors, and also having it available on their website. And then also just ideas for different fundraising events, like having a wine tasting and possibly using a trivia night through one of the apps. So just a lot of really great sharing of ideas of how to evolve these events from being what they were traditionally in person and seeing how they fit in today's climate.
Perfect.
I'd like to say too, one of the things that Connie Maines is no longer with us, but one of the things she brought up, which I thought was really relevant too, is that they're providing a platform to provide people to come together, and not necessarily to learn, as she said, to learn about the owl in the woods, but just to have an opportunity, or she said, a platform to create for people to come together, which I think in a way is another opportunity to just talk about community. And so, we have, I'm thinking personally in Lyme, but I'm sure all of us have like a big field somewhere that we could, host something, whether it is, simple, like she talked about, is hosting concerts this whole summer. So I love that idea that it's not just trying to inform people about specifically conservation, but just being able to be a platform for having people come together. I think it was fabulous.
I have a question.
Sure.
You had mentioned Thanksgiving is dead time, but I've noticed that there is like Giving Tuesday, and we've never done that. But what's the success rate from your organizations? Have you tried Giving Tuesday, and was it worthwhile?
I would say yes, and I would say yes, especially this year. When I said dead zone, I really meant just the weekend, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it's just not a time when people are sorting through the mail and paying a lot of attention to what's going on. So if you're timing your fall appeal to land on that Friday or that Saturday, it's probably not the best idea. Just hold it until the next week and let it go then. But yeah, I think Giving Tuesday, especially this year, because of what we've seen with other giving days across the country, I think it's an enormous opportunity for us.
And I just want to point out the time. We've got about 3 minutes left, and I know Amy would like to wrap us up right at 1:30 with a little spiel. So maybe one more comment or so.
Well, before we do that, let me mention that all these slides, I mentioned up front that all these slides are available on my website. Rebecca's going to put the URL in the chat room so you can pull it down. It's at the very bottom of that. It's the resources page on my website, and you can scroll all the way down to the bottom, and it's pretty easily identifiable there. if you want the slides, they're available there. Obviously, I got a, or not obviously, but I do have a blog every week that I'd encourage you to subscribe to, or at least to check in on. I love the feedback also. Any last comments before we give it over to Amy, or questions? Good. Well, for my part, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate all your work in saving land and conservation in Connecticut. You live in a beautiful state.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. First, of course, David, thank you for traveling across the country to be with us here in Connecticut today. Cyberspace is incredible, isn't it? And it's good to have you. It's always good to have you, David. And I think from my perspective, this was very helpful. But I wanted to just share just one other takeaway from our group, and that is when we were talking about consistency in communications, we weren't just talking about it in the context of talking with our donors. It was also about talking with each other. And from my perspective at CLCC, it's always good to hear that, because as you all know, since April 3rd, we have been offering almost weekly these opportunities in some context or another, whether topical in nature or just conversational in nature, these opportunities to connect with each other. And our program that Rebecca has run so ably of Conserving Land by Staying Connected is really geared for that and for that purpose. And, you know, as we're all kind of maneuvering through this uncharted territory and not really knowing what lies ahead, I think the one takeaway for me always is that we are a community, a very strong community, not only because of the land, of the work that we do in protecting land, but also because of the relationships that we have forged with each other. And I think, you know, we're always here for you. CLCC is always here for you. And if you have a question, if you have a need, we want to know what it is, because we will hopefully be able to respond to that. And this Conserving Land by Staying Connected program was one very responsive in nature. We really had no idea what we were going to do from one week to another. We'd hear an idea, we'd say, yep, we're going to offer that. And so our fall programming begins, and it culminates with our October 17th event, which again is our virtual conference, and I hope that you will all join. And if you paid to attend in March and were so generous to allow us to keep your registration, then of course you just come without having to pay anything extra. And for those of you that did not, the fee is pretty reasonable. So I hope that you will join us that day. We're going to be doing some celebrating for some Excellence in Conservation Awards. But mostly just stay in touch. That's what we're here for, and we want to hear from you. And I want to thank you all so much for all the work that you do. This has been quite a year, and we still have a few months left, and we're going to make the most of it, and we're going to do our work, and we're going to do it together. So hang in there, keep it up, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Amy.
All right, take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And Rebecca, thank you. And Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you.